Where to Hunt podcast. It's okay.
Hi, I'm Dan Small, host of Outdoor Wisconsin, and I listen to Where to Hunt.
It's okay.
I'm Kurt Geyer with Working Class Bow Hunter. I listen to Where to Hunt podcast, and it's decent.
It's all right.
Hey, this is Bud Fisher with Catching Deers, and I think the Where to Hunt podcast is all right.
Hey there, welcome to Where to Hunt podcast, the podcast that connects public land hunting enthusiasts.
You almost botched it.
I swooped in and saved her. Pulled that joystick and we came out of that tailspin.
You were overthinking it, weren't you?
It's like, where am I?
What do I do? What do I say? Oh, yeah.
This is the OKest podcast in the Midwest, coming at you from the OKest Hunter podcast studio. And if you love the OKest Hunter and you've had OKest Hunter moments of field, you can totally relate to all of our shenanigans here and in the woods. Head on over to okshunter.com, use code W2H podcast and save yourself 10%. Father's Day is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. We got some fishing stuff too, by the way.
That we do.
And I did get to try the Backwoods Grind Sunset Roast.
And?
Freshly ground this morning. Delightful.
Delightful?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a slap in the face.
Oh, when you're waking up in the morning, it was just like, this is great. I feel awesome. So, very nice. Head over to backwoodsgrind.com. Use code W2H podcast for 10% off. And all of this fun technology that you see here, the camera, how it's all wired in, our live broadcasting stuff, our call-in number, it's all brought to you by Spartan Forge. They're a data-driven deer predictability app currently with plenty more coming down the pike. So check those guys out at spartanforge.ai. You can use code W2H for 20% off. Good friends of ours over there. Make sure you give Bill some shit if you ever get on the phone with them. Anyway. And then obviously we're cheering here. So Drop Time Spirits. The 12-point bourbon is delicious. It also puts some hair on your chest if you're not ready for it.
Well, the way you're running around with no shirt on, we can tell you drink plenty of it.
Yeah, I can't run with the shirt on. You get that chafage on your nipples. It's no fun. It starts to really hurt.
Now this went to another level of weird.
I've been running. I biked today
the
first time, and I learned that my bike doesn't shift gears. So I was riding a fixed gear bike the whole time. So I got to get that figured out.
There you go.
We did some fishing.
We did.
Over the weekend with our friend Jeff. That was a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Caught my first walleye.
Quite good.
Pure happenstance. We were fishing for pike, and a walleye decided to slam the MEPS.
Yeah, buddy.
Which is cool. I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Take what I can get over here.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
That's true. I like that. Anyway, so we're ready to go here. I suppose. What's new with you? You got anything?
Turkey season, final turkey season tomorrow. I got a tag, so I'm going to go out in the morning for the first couple hours before work and see if anybody's around. It's been pretty quiet back there, it sounds like, so we'll see.
You might get 2 turkeys. You might not get 2 turkeys.
I'll be happy to get with the one I've got. So
okay, well that's good. You should be happy with the one you got.
Mm-hmm.
Like a nice bird. We do have a guest today joining us via phone. They're in a remote location, so video was going to be sketchy, so we just opted for the phone out of the gate. But joining us today is Joe Kruse with Big Woods Bucks. Joe, how you doing? There you are. Hey, Joe, can you hear me now?
I got you.
Cool. Maybe I never actually muted you.
Can you hear me?
You stayed quiet for that whole time. We can hear you great. Thank you.
I was just listening to 70s porn music in the background when wondering what podcast I was on.
We've had some pretty raunchy starts lately. I don't know what's going on.
It was 70s porn music, isn't it?
I ripped out a bush out of my front yard over the weekend, and I made the mistake of asking where I can get rid of a bush. Yeah, I should have thought that over more before I posted that inquiry, because I got a lot of goofy commentary back. My own fault, of course. But anyway, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you got going on, where you're from, and we'll dive into a bunch of good stuff tonight.
All right. I'm Joe Kruse. I'm with Big Woods Bucks. up here in northwestern Maine. I own Lake Parlin Lodge. My wife and I operate that. We have been for about the last 12 years. And we're kind of the Northwoods Maine experience. We we're a big snowmobile destination in the winter. Of course, we're on a lake, so we're typical summer stuff. We do weddings and things, but of course, then we got hunting season as well. And I guide for moose and whitetail, and we do I do a podcast with some other guys here. We have organization called Big Woods Bucks, where we pretty much specialize just in sharing the stories and educational stuff about tracking in the big woods, which when we refer to big woods, it's basically, I think, similar to what you guys have in Wisconsin, which is just large tracts of, it's private land owned by timber companies, but we have a huge swath of it here. So it's a big area. The deer operate a little differently, where they're kind of a migrating deer. But yeah, that's basically what we do up here.
Very cool. What made you decide to get into what you're doing? What made you decide, yeah, maybe we should just go up here and get involved with this lodge? And
Yeah, because you're from Florida.
Yeah.
Well,
originally.
Yeah, it's right. So I grew up. I lived in Jackman, Maine, which is just 10 miles north of where our lodge is. I lived there when I was real young. My parents were from Florida and moved up there, and were there for about 10 years. But they ended up going back to Florida, but had bought a camp in the area, which is very close to where the lodge is. And so in my childhood, I lived in South Florida, but we'd come up on the, summer vacation and Christmas and that sort of thing. So I had a lot of roots to the area and the woods and stuff. So, I grew up hunting in the Everglades, pretty unconventional stuff, deer hunting off airboats and swamp buggies and that sort of thing. Hunting in the traditional styles of the South, which is with hounds and of course, stand hunting and everything. And I just knew that I didn't want to stay in South Florida, especially when our kids, we have a son and a daughter that we knew we didn't want to raise down there. So we made the move in 2006 and headed north and just kind of laid down roots here and started off. We weren't in the lodge business right away. That came 4 or 5 years after we moved here. But basically what happened was the property that we own is on the same lake where our camp is and became available. So it was kind of like combining the things I really love to do, which was hunting and snowmobiling. So that's kind of how we ended up there. And it's just grown and blossomed over time to where, we do a lot of moose hunts. I started off guiding moose hunts first, which is, I absolutely just love doing. I mean, the moose game is a lot of fun. And then I had always kept Novembers kind of for myself as much as I could, but I got together with Hal Blood and Chris Dalty from Big Woods Bucks about, I think it's been about 10 years now, 9 or 10 years. And we started doing some stuff together and they had already had Big Woods Bucks, had been going for 5 or 6 years anyway before that. And Hal was a real successful outfitter up in the Jackman area, had a business, and he had sold and has since kind of got back into it. But so we operate Big Woods Outfitters out of the lodge for the month of November, and we we kind of specialize just in guiding hunters doing, tracking. And it's kind of a niche thing because there's only so many places you can do it. You have to have, big tracts of land and obviously early snowfall. So that rules out a lot of places right there. And
Sure.
we're kind of the area to go to in the Northeast.
Absolutely. I mean, we have falls during our seasons that we may not see snow until January. And we've had some weird years where we don't get hardly any snow at all.
Yeah, and Maine's got some drastic differences in climate between southern and northern Maine and the mountains and the coast. So we're fortunate where we're at. I mean, we're not real high altitude by any means, but the lodge sits at 1,700 feet, and our mountain peaks are 3,700 feet, the tallest one around. They're not giant mountains, but they're enough to wear you out. When we're get lucky, we the last few years we have where we get snow early, we can usually start off November with tracking snow the first week, which is always a lot of fun.
Yeah, so talk about that a little bit. I mean, you mentioned you heard one of our episodes with Andre DeQuisto with Lone Wolf Custom Gear, and obviously they're known for the kind of hang and hunt, run and gun, mobile hunter setup where they're popping up tree stands and things of that nature. That's not going to work out by you. Can you explain that a little bit more?
It would work.
Well,
yeah,
but they don't. But they don't have to if they've got
there's
snow.
Guys that are
Sure.
successful. It's and I've done I bow hunt a lot, and I've done a lot of stand hunting. I love it all. I mean, it's tracking is kind of unique, and I certainly prefer to track when we have the conditions. But I've done a lot of stand hunting over the years as well, and the best way I like to describe it is stand hunting. You do your work ahead of time. You do your scouting, all your homework, your setups before you sit in the stand, and you go out and you sit in the stand and you're basically waiting for it to happen. Whereas tracking, you go out in the morning, you find your track, and now you're making it happen. You're on the track. There's a deer at the end of the track. A lot of guys don't so much care for it because it's physical. You got to be in shape and you got to push yourself, and it can be, typical days are 9 to 12, sometimes 13 miles of walking. And, a lot of guys just don't care for it. They'd rather stand hunt, and that's great. But it's, that's the biggest difference. I think is just when you're on the track, I think it's more suited for guys that don't have the patience. That's really a lot of the guys here that have grown up tracking. If they sit and have their sandwich, that's about the most they want to sit during the day is having their lunch. So it's definitely less about preseason scouting and all that. I mean, we still like to put out cameras, but it's mostly just to see what we can get on them more than using it as a tool like you would if you were setting a stand.
Sure. So, I mean, the wind's got to be in your favor too. You're when you say you get on a track, you obviously look at the direction the tracks are going. There's a deer at the other end of it, and you're making moves on that thing throughout the entire day. What's that like when you finally get in range? Like, how are you? To me, it feels impossible to sneak up on a whitetail, which is why I like the whole sit thing and pretend you're not even there. But I love the aggressive style that you're talking about, and we've seen a lot of people, personalities have success with that. If the wind's obviously going with the tracks, that's probably not going to work out, right? So then you just keep going to find one that crosses that, or how?
No, you find the track. You find the track that you want. You don't worry about the wind. you're obviously thinking about it if you're on the track. And, it's like we always talk about. It's a day tracking is a day of 1,000 decisions. You're constantly trying to guess what the deer might do. You're trying to pick them out. You're deciding whether to go, over the log, under the log, or around the log. You're aging the track. You're looking at it, deciding if you want to even go after it or not. That's your first decision you're making. So, it's a constant chess match, is what it boils down to. And once you find a track, that you want to take, which, guys have different strategies on that. And I think everyone kind of, uses both strategies or a couple different strategies, which is either drive around and look for a track, that crosses a road, or just go to an area that you think is going to hold deer, and you walk until you cross the track that you want. Sometimes that means picking up a track that might not be, the biggest track, or, you don't really think it's a monster buck, but it's a track, and it typically they'll lead you to other deer. So you jump on that and follow it. And as far as sneaking up on a deer, obviously that's the challenge, is seeing him before he sees you, or at least, catching him where you can get a shot off. And, probably that's one of the big things that we hear a lot of guys that stand hunt or hunt differently is, they want to wait for their perfect broadside shot, the deer standing there, make sure you get it in the boiler room and kill it quickly. Well, we're obviously trying to get a good shot in, but if you're not willing to shoot at a running deer, then you shouldn't track him, is what it boils down to.
Absolutely.
Because most of the time you're going to be shooting at a running deer. You're going to do the best that you can to put a shot in the deer, obviously, and kill them quick. It's a lot different having snow doing that as opposed to doing it on bare ground, for obvious reasons. It's just one of those things that, and understandably so, guys grow up, you want to make the most ethical shot and kill the deer quickly, which we all do. But with tracking, you don't always have that luxury, to do that. Sometimes you do. Yeah. Sometimes it's just like you see on the videos where the deer standing broadside and easy shot and whatever, but it's not real typical, I wouldn't say.
No. I mean, even here in our area, like, I do a lot of walking through my public lands around my house, and like, I know which areas, just historically from bumping deer out of these areas, like, I know when I have to slow down and I have to really watch what I'm doing, because deer will get up from from a spot in that area and book it. And my window of opportunity is very nil. So I better be ready. I'm trying to make an ethical shot, but when a deer is running through red rush and tag alders and cattails, it's very hard to get a good shot. So I don't want to shoot at just a brown patch, but I try to make sure that I'm at least hitting it forward. But it doesn't always happen. It's a difficult thing to do.
Well, based on the tracking too, like, you could be pretty far into the forest at that point, and if you get something, are you packing these things out? Are you gutting and dragging? And I think with the moose, I know the answer, and I'm excited to get onto that too. But you're like, shoulder deep into the forest, and you've gone zigzagging all over the place. Are you using GPS so you don't get super turned around following deer tracks, or are you just using a good old compass? And what's your what are your tools out there?
Well, that's changed a lot. That's changed a lot over the years, obviously. And, guys that have been doing it, and Maine is loaded with really good woodsmen and good hunters. Just because I wasn't fortunate enough to grow up in it, where I was in the woods all the time, being that I was in South Florida. It's when you see kids that are brought up and men that are raised in Maine that their dads took them out at a young age and always had them in the woods. They definitely develop woodsmanship and skills that help them with their navigation and everything. But as far as tracking and where we're at, I mean, I use my Onyx Hunt app for any of that. I download, aerials from for areas that I'm going to, so I always have it in off-grid mode, and I don't need cell service. And it's a great tool. Before that, when GPSs first came out, we'd carry a GPS, and that was more. We still always have a compass. You generally can walk in any direction. You're not going to go more than probably 5 or 6 miles typically before you hit a road. So, getting lost is a lot more difficult nowadays than it used to be. Back before we had all the logging roads, it was pretty common, and before we had GPSs. But nowadays, even though I think it still is intimidating to guys that come up that are new to it, it's pretty easy now with what we have to work with. But the only time when you're tracking that you're using that is to maybe look and see if you can figure out where that deer is going, what he might be headed for, or maybe you look on there and you see if there's a cut, up ahead that if you think you're close to him, that you might catch him crossing, something like that. But typically it's, you kill a deer, they're all the deer are cut and dragged out. No one that I know ever cuts them up, because here in the Northeast, and especially Maine, it's kind of a big thing to take them to the tagging station and weigh them. So everyone wants their deer to come out whole anyway. And we have what's called the 200-pound club. So, that magic number traditionally for guys here in Maine is to have to kill a buck that dresses over 200 pounds. And it's more about the body weight kind of than it is the size of the rack, because, we have some nice rack bucks in Maine, obviously some real good ones, but it's not like out where you guys are, where the deer are eating in the farm fields all the time and getting all that good nutrition.
Yeah, hopefully you got a taxidermist that has mounts that reflect that size. I've heard some of these taxidermists, where they get their foam from or whatever their molds. You can get like a really dinky looking deer, and it's like, well, wait a second, this thing's huge. 200-pound deer. I mean, geez, I'm 205. Grab my hand and start dragging me through the woods. Good luck. Holy crap, you guys, that's nuts. That's a big. That's a lot of dead weight.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, yeah, it is. But typically you're dragging on snow, which makes it a little bit easier. You hope that it's in a spot that if you have to, you can come back in with a snowmobile and use that to help you. So, I think typically the most guys are dragging is a couple miles.
Sure.
Which is not, I'm not saying that's super easy, but it's not a huge deal unless you got to go up over a mountain.
A couple miles on
you can
any...
usually go down and get to a logging road.
Sure. Yeah, and a non-manicured path, a couple miles on uneven terrain is hefty. I mean, I thought my lungs were going to collapse last season dragging a buck a quarter or half a mile, wherever the hell it was, through cattails and whatever that canary grass crap is, where you get your hip flexors start to kill you because you're lifting your feet up so high so you don't trip. That stuff's rough.
Right.
Yeah, different world up at you guys. It sounds fun.
I always look at it where it's the least killing the buck's the hard part. Get them on the ground, I mean, the drag is the drag wherever it is. I always look at it like, we'll get them out. I kind of do the same thing moose hunting. A lot of guys worry about how far back they kill a moose or how far from the road, because for years it just kind of, the normal thing to do is guys would just hunt the roads here in their trucks and, drive the logging roads and kill the moose close to the road so they can either, winch them out from the truck or, it's a lot easier. And kind of the same thing as a deer. A lot of guys don't want to cut their moose up because they want to weigh it, but we cut a lot of moose up and pack them out. Just because that's the quickest, easiest, most efficient way to get them out of the woods when they're back in a ways. And moose hunting in Maine has changed a lot in the last, say, 10 or 15 years, where the moose we have less of them because of winter ticks, and they're a little bit tougher to kill now. So you do have to get back in the woods and get away from the roads where all the traffic is.
When do you start moose hunting?
Our first season is the last week in September. We have 4 different seasons, really. We have the 2 big ones are the 2 bull hunts, which there's one the last week of September and one the second week of October. And they're basically just broken up into different zones in the state. So we're always hunting those 2 weeks. And then we have a cow hunt the 3rd week of October, which I don't usually do a lot of that because it's getting so close to deer season, but I did a cow hunt last year. I guided one. And then for other zones of the state, there's a little bit of it in November, but I've never messed around with that at all. But the 2 big weeks are September and October.
Is it easy to get a cow tag?
I'm sorry, say again?
Are cow tags easily attainable versus a bull tag?
This year, yes, they started a new. We have a lot of stuff going on with our moose herd here in Maine right now. Because of the winter ticks, there's a lot of differing opinions on what the best way to handle the moose herd is. There's a lot of people that want to cancel the hunt because they're not seeing as many of them on the road, and it's important to tourism. It's nonsense in my opinion, because we have our moose herd is a lot less than what it used to be, but I believe it's still healthy.
Can blame Cheers for that, huh?
Yeah, the winter ticks. Yeah, which are
the tourism.
Specific. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No,
I haven't heard of that. No,
that?
I was talking about the tourism. What's that show?
Yeah.
Cheers with the moose comes in the beginning, or whatever. I think that was in Maine where that took place, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, whatever. I thought it was somewhere up there. But no, yeah, the winter ticks. What's going on with that? We don't have that here that I'm aware of. That'd be freaking terrible.
They're a tick that they only host on they have to have a moose to host. So they get on the moose in the fall, and they feed on them all winter, and a moose will get thousands of these ticks on them that just stay on all winter long. And what it does, it makes the moose anemic, and the young calves and some of the cows succumb to it, especially in a tough winter. They just don't have the strength to fight what they normally have to fight with the cold and the elements. And even like this winter, where it was a real mild winter, we had some die off from it. So what they're going to try and do, they're experimenting with one of our zones that has a high population of moose. They're going to split it in half, and they're going to issue a pile of cow permits, and in one half of it, they're going to knock the herd down. The theory being that if they knock the host down, then the ticks will die off as well. Because there's really no good effective way to kill the ticks.
No.
It's pretty, we never had the ticks before. They're a recent problem. A lot of people, are blaming warming, which I think is part of it for sure, because the ticks, when they drop off the moose in the spring, if they fall on bare ground, they lay their eggs. If they fall on snow, they don't survive nearly as well. It puts a hurting on them. So last year we had snow late, so it was a good year, for killing off ticks somewhat, but this year, not so much. We were done with our snow in early April, which is pretty rare. So we're expecting an explosive moose tick season this year, but we'll just have to see where it goes.
Do you think those areas also have a pretty high population of whitetail? The only reason I ask is, like, I know some areas down in my area here that, because there is such a high population of whitetail hosts, there's a huge population of ticks. Like, you can't even walk through someone's yard without getting several wood ticks on you, or even a deer tick for that matter. I mean, there's a difference in the species. Obviously, the deer ticks are smaller and they're a bit more potent. And then you have the worry of Lone Star ticks too, which that's a whole nother topic altogether. But do you think that's something that's happening in your area?
Well, no, because there's not a large deer population at all. In fact, where the area where we have the most moose, it's actually the fewest amount of deer in the state. Mostly because their wintering yards were wiped out years ago, so they've had a hard time in the North Maine woods area. The deer have had a hard time up there making a comeback, but the tick situation, the wood tick and the deer tick are a bit different. And from what I understand, I'm certainly no expert on the moose ticks, but from what I've heard from the biologist is that the moose ticks don't affect the deer because they groom themselves and they eat them off, and the moose don't. The moose will just rub against trees trying to get rid of them and try to get rid of trying to get rid of the ticks, and they'll just rub all their hide off, their fur, and they've got no protection against the cold because of that. So yeah, the ticks, we have a terrible tick population in the central to southern part of the state, same as you, I would assume, where it's the wood ticks and the deer ticks. And, it's the same story. We have a large deer herd in this part of the state. There's a lot of turkeys now, a lot of debate about what role the turkeys play with the ticks, but unfortunately, the deer and the wood ticks are moving north as well. So we'll be dealing with them up in the north woods, I'm sure, in the not too distant future.
Certainly.
That's rough to hear about. I mean, I don't know. I was doing research on ticks a couple weeks back because we got like 30 of them on us on a family hike, and my kids got them on our dog, and the things they're just hard to kill.
Nasty, isn't it?
Yeah, man. They're
disgusting.
Carry a lighter with you and some toilet paper, wrap them in toilet paper and burn them till they pop.
Yeah, man, brutal freaking things. They'll live, what I researched, they'll live underwater for up to 2 days. They can live unfed for 2 years. You can't squish them. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, I know. It's like a challenge to get one with your fingernail and kill it. They just keep living. But a lot of guys, I read a lot of stuff whenever things come out about the ticks, and a lot of guys in our area, because I mean, there was never ticks in Maine, when I was younger growing up, and I mean, it wasn't an issue at all. It's only been the last, say, 10 or 15 years that it's been a real problem. A lot of guys think it's because we don't spray anymore. They used to spray for different stuff in the forest, and that was probably one of the things killing the ticks. But I would guess that they'd have some opposition to taking a plane up and spraying again.
Right.
So, until they come up with some way. I mean, there's people that want to let loose guinea hens all over the state to eat them, and I don't think that would be effective. I mean, who knows where it's going to go, but it certainly is an issue everywhere, it sounds like.
Fascinating. So you said you guys do pack out your moose, but a lot of people don't because they want to weigh them also. You're following the same kind of approach that we just talked about for whitetail and doing that with moose as well?
Yes. Yep.
So picking up a moose track's got to,
where it's just.
Sorry, yeah, I was gonna say picking up a moose track's got to be harder.
Killing the moose? No. Oh, no, not tracking them. No, we don't. It's rare that we have tracking snow for moose season. We had a couple times, and I actually years ago I did track one, but it was just it was an outlier. It wasn't something that you do very often. But no, moose hunting is all. What we do is call them in. So you're calling, using a cow call and bull grunts and raking trees and stuff to call the moose in. And that's the way that typically, when guys come to hunt moose, that's what they want to do, because it's the excitement and the rush of calling them in, and it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. That sounds like, it's a huge animal. I just, we've been talking about hunting elk a lot over here, and I have a third child on the way, so that put the botch on it for the kibosh on it for this year. Who knows if next year will be the year that can happen or not? But moose is a whole other one where it's like it's just such a rare sight for us here in Wisconsin. It's such a giant, majestic animal. Greg asking about, is it easy to get a cow tag? Because just the meat's got to be so damn good. Like, do you prefer moose over venison?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's in my opinion, moose is real close to beef. It's just much leaner.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, moose meat, you'll find that a lot of times people that don't like venison, everyone always says it's gamey or whatever, but people that don't like whatever that flavor is, they don't like with deer meat, they don't get it with moose, and they seem to prefer moose, over it. It's definitely, when you get a moose, you got meat for a long time. Typically, obviously depends on how much you eat, but it's going to last 3 years.
Oh my God.
If you don't give it all away.
Holy crap. What's your favorite recipe with moose?
My wife, typically in the winter months, we eat the most of it, and it's usually in a crock pot with mashed potatoes, and it's about as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to cook it. All the recipes that you do with beef are, things that you just substitute it.
Yep. Substitute.
We do a lot of
moose for beef.
because you end up with a lot of ground moose meat also, which, you mix with a little bit of pork, and, we use it. She'll make lasagnas with it and stuff like that, and use the moose instead of beef, and it's great.
You big on grilled burgers there?
Oh yeah. Who's not?
Yeah.
It's tough to beat.
Yeah.
But we did, I did a trip last September. We're actually going again this year, not the same group, but my buddy and I he's been my best friend since high school. We grew up hunting together. He lives down in Tennessee. We did a trip to Alaska this past September. We did a do-it-yourself moose hunt. It was like a drop camp hunt where we got flown in and dropped off. And, it was I thought we were remote here in Maine until I did that. It gives you a different perspective when you get dropped off out there. But as far as handling the moose, you were asking about the packing and stuff. It's a much bigger animal out there, and it's a job. Because you don't necessarily have to pack them a long way, but it's such tough walking out there. And Alaska is very strict with their laws, which is really good, where you can't, you don't leave a fistful of meat on the carcass. Everything comes out. So, it's a challenging hunt just to do the hunt itself, but getting the meat out is part of the adventure.
No doubt. You could be taking several trips with two dudes and an animal that size. It's like packing out a cow.
It's bigger than.
taller than for sure, bigger than for sure. My
Yeah.
gosh. And you got to contend with
I was
predation
actually
up there too.
surprised.
Isn't like the gunshot the dinner bell for some of those animals?
Yeah, they say that was definitely a concern of ours because we don't deal with anything like that here. So, I mean, everyone that goes to Alaska hunting, you're thinking of the bears, and we had our sidearms. We both were carrying pistols and everything, and it was definitely when we first got there, we were a little more nervous, and any kind of set cover that we went into, you're constantly looking around, and after 10 or 12 days in the woods, you are a little less like that. You kind of get used to a little bit more, and you still want to stay alert. I mean, when we were cutting the moose up and packing it, we always were together. We never separated. Just be aware and pay attention, because you get caught up in the excitement, and you got your moose on the ground and everyone's happy and stuff, and you just don't want to lose sight of what can happen out there, so you just be smart and pay attention, and you're all right.
Yeah. My old neighbor, when I was single in an apartment, he lived below me. He went to Alaska and he did a DIY with his buddy, and he came back in a cast because a bear, when they went back to get their meat, they had a 4-wheeler, and the 4-wheeler had a small trailer on it. So they loaded the meat in the trailer. He's older, and he's driving on the 4-wheeler, and along comes a bear and runs right alongside of him and bashes into the side of him, flipped his ATV, and then he broke a couple bones in his leg. So he broke, I don't even remember what bone it was, but he's been around for quite some time. And that was the story. I was like, what? A bear chased you down in your 4-wheeler? Like, that's insane. Gosh, you get him on the show. He's got stories for days. He's aged, I think, pretty well for an old man, but he's been around the block over there. That was his jam. So yeah, you hear stuff like that and you're like, no way, no way. But then in the back of your mind, you're like, oh my gosh, what if that happens or something like that?
Bears mean business.
Well, there was a story right after we got back this year. We were there it's basically the first season. The units out there have all different dates, but ours is the 5th to the 15th of September. So we had just got back, and there was a story of 2 guys, I think they were from Ohio, that killed a moose, and they were packing it. And from what I understood reading the story, they separated, and one of the guys was hauling the meat back to their camp, and he's the one that had a gun. The guy that was back with the moose didn't have a gun. And the guy that had packed to the camp came back, and the bear charged him, and he went back to where the moose was, and his buddy was dead. So he was mauled and killed.
Oh my God.
This past season. Yeah. It's definitely nothing to mess around with, but I think, it's just one of those things you deal with. It's part of being in the woods, and you make a decision that that's what you want to do. So you just take your precautions and move along.
I'll never not have a sidearm after hearing you say that. If that's something I ever even embark on.
I wouldn't either.
No chance.
Yeah, I had mine on my chest all the time. I mean, everything I did, I had a gun there just because, it's just, why wouldn't you?
What caliber were you packing?
It's 454 Casole. I got the Ruger Alaskan.
Sure. It's a nice pistol.
Which, that was like one of, 100 decisions that you got to make when you're planning, being that neither one of us had ever gone hunting in Alaska before. Being first time out there, you listen to and watch everything that you can. He carried a 10 millimeter Glock, semi-auto.
That's another one. You can get a few rounds off.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of the thinking on it, is you have a few more to throw out. Everyone's got their opinion on what's the best sidearm for out there. I tried to read as much as I could.
Give me 2 of what you have, man. I'm going double fisting. I'm just gonna light it up, man.
No, the 10 mil's got plenty of punch. I mean, that's what the FBI started and Secret Service started carrying. And then some guys didn't like the recoil of the 10 mil, so they downsized to the 40 Smith and Wesson, or 40 short and weak they call it. So same size bullet, just not as much powder. And then there's other guys that they're fine with a 44 or 454 Casal. Those are the big players, the big hammers that they pull out.
Yeah, the recoil, at least the one I have, the Alaskan, it's such a heavy pistol. The recoil is not bad at all.
No.
I shot a lot with it before I went last summer, and I thought it was going to be, because you can shoot 45 long Colt out of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheaper and less recoil. But for me, I think that, you practice what you're going to carry because that's what it's going to be like when you shoot it. So,
sure.
I shot a lot of rounds last summer, and now I've got it, for this year's trip, I've got everything. So it's easy, have everything ready to go.
That's pretty cool. Now, Maine's desolate. Alaska's more desolate. Were you bring anything for like GPS tracking? There's a product I've seen Aaron Snyder talk about, or people are asking him if he's using it. I don't know how to say it. It's like Zoleo Life, Zoleo. It's like this little thing that helps others know where you are and that you're safe, and if you need to make a call or a text or whatever, that you can do that. So it's kind of like a satellite phone, but this is like more like a pager that can accommodate that or something. Are you bringing things like that out with you too?
Yes, we all actually use DeLorme. Well, and they were started with DeLorme. That was a company from Maine, but now it's Garmin owns it. But it's the Garmin InReach.
Yeah. InReach.
The InReach is a satellite messenger that you can pair with your phone, and you send text messages, or you can send preset messages. Unlimited preset messages, and it's got an emergency function on it. So you just hit the SOS button, and it automatic, within 5 minutes, they've got your location and the rescue crews are on the way. And I actually carry that anytime I'm in the woods here in Maine, even because we have so much area that doesn't have cell coverage, that, it's not just for life or death things, but, you get stuck bad or you break down and it's, 25 or 30 mile walk out. It's nice to just hit that and have a buddy come get you.
Yeah. And
so
if your wife's anything like my wife,
to me, it's absolutely essential.
Sure. And if your wife's anything like my wife, you need to be able to relay some information if you're running late or having an issue.
Absolutely. I mean, that's and I use it all the time. It's got the preset on there. It's, just checking in, you just hit it and you hit one button and it sends it out and you don't have to worry about it. So that's a major reason for it as well.
Yeah, that's pretty useful stuff to consider and think about. Different world, and the Northwoods here in Wisconsin, the Nicolet, I don't know what they have in Michigan. I know there's a big Northwoods over there too. I don't know what their area is called. I know ours.
Well, one of the well-known ones in Michigan is the Pigeon.
Okay.
You just mentioned Michigan, but the Pigeon River Forest. But Maine, he was just saying that you're mostly paper company. Do you have you must have some national forests too, like we do. We get the Nicolet and the Chequamegon that intermingles in along with some of the state forests too, that intermingle in with all these large tracts of paper company land.
Yeah, it's pretty unique here. Well, we don't have, Maine is 99% private land. So we have Acadia National Park, which you can't hunt in.
Nope.
It's not, I mean, it's a sizable piece, but it's not that big. But then we have Baxter State Park, which you can't hunt in. And other than that, there's really not a lot of public land because you don't really need it. It's changing a little bit nowadays, but Maine has traditionally been, the law is if the land is not posted, you can legally hunt it. In other words, the onus is on the landowner to keep people off. So it's just kind of an expected thing that, people that grow up in it never even worry about having land to hunt on in the Northwoods, because it's vast woods that everyone can go to. And there's not, I was listening to some of your guys' stuff, and the battle basically on public lands with the number of hunters and bumping into people and that sort of thing. And I won't say it's non-existent, but I could count on one hand the number of hunters that I bumped into in the woods in the last 15 years.
Holy freaking crap.
Yeah. Like if you're tracking, if you're on a deer track, and it's just super rare. And I tell guys that, we'll have guys that come, stay at the lodge and hunt, and they'll ask about places to go, and, where they're not going to bump into anyone, and I'll send them off somewhere, and, wouldn't you know, they'll see 2 people that day or something. But typically it just isn't an issue at all where we hunt. It's pretty uncommon to bump into people.
That's fascinating. And the landowners, these, paper companies and such, they're not worried about like legal recourse and things of that nature with insurance claims if someone gets hurt somewhere in their tract or something like that. So they don't feel the need to post it. And
nope, there's landowner. Yeah, there's landowner protection in Maine where the unless it's a deliberate negligence, then the landowner can't be sued. And we have those laws because it's not just hunting, it's snowmobiling. We have 13,000 miles of snowmobile trails, of groom trails in the state. And, we're the most popular destination in the Northeast for snowmobiling. So if we didn't have that relationship with the landowners where they weren't held responsible, everything would be closed off and there wouldn't be any access. But because we have the laws that we do, and we have cheap tree growth taxes for the big landowners, so it makes it easier for them to carry the land. It keeps it open. They don't have to. They're obviously trying to maximize their property with, the wood cutting and other things they do, but their carry costs are cheaper. So, keeping it open, it's kind of an unwritten rule. People support the paper companies and let them do their thing, and in return, everyone gets to use the land.
It's a cool setup. Sounds like it's working out
so
well.
It's kind of a nice relationship. I mean, you get bumps in the roads here and there like anything else, but we have in the North Maine woods is the largest tract of land east of the Mississippi without paved roads. And if you look at it like in a satellite picture at nighttime where you see all the lights all over the country, there's a giant black spot in northwestern Maine. And that's where we hunt.
Sounds like my kind of place.
There's some Discovery Channel shows that exist up there, I think, like some of the folks that, I don't know what the hell the show's called, but, Living in the Middle of Nowhere is the show.
Law.
Not that one. No, it's like, they'll like, oh, now we're in Alaska and we're following this one nomad dude. And now we're back in Maine following this other nomad dude. He's just in the middle of nowhere living.
Right.
It's all scripted bullshit anyway.
I don't know. I'm a believer.
It's all what?
It's all scripted bullshit if it's on Discovery Channel. I got a story I can share about that later.
Sounds like Greg's got a grudge. There's a content.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's interesting talking to when we were out there last year and talking to Alaskans about that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the shows, the only one that got a lot of respect was The Last Alaskans.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty good one. But yeah, I agree with you. A lot of scripted stuff.
Yep. So your deer season.
So you guys, yep.
If you don't mind, I'm going to just ask a couple of selfish questions. You guys get one deer tag for the year, or do you get a bow tag and a rifle tag? How's that work?
Typically you buy your license, you get one buck tag.
Okay.
Or we have an any deer system where you can put in. And this year there's a lot of any deer permits available, but that's more for the central to southern half of the state.
Sure.
Up where the lodge is and where we do most of our hunting, there's very few doe tags up there because the population's a lot less, and it's only one deer up there no matter what. Some areas of the state where we have high populations, they have what's called the expanded zone, which is archery only. And I mean, they have a system where basically you get like one buck tag and limitless doe tags.
Mm-hmm.
You can just keep buying them. So there are opportunities, but the expanded areas is, it's a lot harder to find those areas to get access to them. It's a lot of private land,
Smaller
that
tracks.
sort of thing. So we basically just rely on our one deer. A lot of guys that like to track will get their deer in Maine, then they'll go over to New Hampshire, maybe get a deer there. They can track in Vermont, they can track in upstate New York. So that's kind of what guys do. A lot of guys used to head out to Ontario, southern Ontario, where 20 years ago, up until about, I think it was probably about 10 years ago when they had the big die-off, but the tracking out there was phenomenal. So a lot of guys would head out there if they, tagged out here, but typically, yeah, it's one deer and you're done.
Fair enough.
But it's enough of a challenge though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it's a 200-pound deer.
Right? It's tracking deer is in today's hunting world, and it's been going on for a long time. People get, caught up with, they have their trail cam pictures of their buck, and they'll have their number one target buck, or it's that sort of thing isn't really part of tracking. You don't typically have any idea what he has for a rack, unless you're reading the sign and seeing where he's walking. I think he has a wide rack because he's walking around trees that are close together or something, but that's about as much as you get until you finally lay eyes on him. It's pretty rare that you would kill a deer tracking him that, you knew what deer it was.
Sure. Makes sense.
Such a different approach. It sounds fun. I mean, like these different approaches, I feel like would just round you out as a hunter in terms of, your experience and expertise and knowledge, and it all kind of can work together and culminate. It would be fun to try that. I would welcome that style as a one-off or a couple of time thing to see how it goes, because it sounds really fun to me.
You guys should come check it out at the very least, one time and see how you like it. I mean, it's an extremely challenging way to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
If you kill any buck, it's an accomplishment that you should be very proud of. It's not, it's just a lot different than the typical deer hunting that we all see. It's a mental game all the time. You're battling the weather all the time. It's just a challenge. It's a fun challenge.
Yeah, we didn't even get into like the type of like clothes you would need for that if it's super cold out, but you're also hiking all the time and moving. You got to have something that's going to wick away all that sweat. But when you finally stop, you're gonna have to. Yeah, that's like for us. We'll hike in light and then we'll pack on once we get set up. So you're heading in and you're getting all hot and sweated up or whatever you're doing, and then you're either exchanging out or layering up as you get settled, so you're not feeling cold and wet. You don't have that luxury doing that, so that's a whole nother topic in and of itself.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that guys that are first time trackers make is they dress too heavy. They don't realize how hot they're going to get walking. We all wear wool. That's like the thing that everyone wears here. It's the best thing to wear for tracking, just because it does keep you warm, repels the water. You don't get wet with it. If it does get wet, it's still warm. It's quiet. There's nothing quieter. I actually tried on one of the warmer days this year. I tried using I've got a lot of Kuiu gear, and I tried some Kuiu pants while I was tracking, and that lasted a very short time just because they're not quiet. You know, when you walk, your little things like your, down around your boots, pants rubbing together there, they make just a little bit of noise, but
Sure.
you can't make any noise.
Right. Polyester blend.
So
stuff.
yeah, the clothing is really important in the tracking game. You know, you don't want to dress too heavy, but you got to be warm and quiet. Pretty much like the same kind of setup. I mean, you see it with the UP guys in Michigan, because I think they're kind of hunting the same way up that way in the Northwoods up there. The old traditional, it's kind of the Northeast is green and black check, but you know, you see a lot of red and black check jackets out there.
Right.
It's cool. Well, why don't you share with us, in the beginning I asked for a memorable hunt, but I also said, well, if you got an okayest moment, we'll take that too. And it sounds like you get a few more of those. You got an okayest hunter moment that you're willing to share with us here?
Yeah. A lot of okay, mediocre, average moments. So, I think I touched on earlier, I said we don't use trail cameras very much here. Just it's kind of more for fun to see what's running around. And I was tracking this. I came across this track, so I took it. It was a real nice buck track, and I tracked him for not very far, and he happened to walk by, which in the big woods, it's would be really, really uncommon to have a trail camera and find a buck track, and that buck would go in front of your camera. But that's exactly what happened. So I'm tracking this deer. I see that he walks in front of my camera. So it was early in the day, and I was close enough to the truck where I could take the card back, and I had a reader there that I could actually look and see what was on it. So I take a look at it, and the buck had passed by the camera 4 hours before. Beautiful buck, big rack, big body. So I took off after him, and kind of had an idea where he was headed to, and he was going uphill. It was, the time of day. I figured he was going up to bed. And, I tracked him to his bed. I came up to his bed, looked around for his tracks leading out, and I turned to my right, and there's a deer standing there looking at me at 75 yards, pretty much out in the wide open. And there was just a little bit of brush where sometimes when a deer is perfectly motionless, when they're looking dead on at you, if there's any kind of brush, it's hard to see what there is for a rack, if any rack at all. So I'm looking, trying to tell what it is. And in my mind, not even thinking it's the deer that I just spent the morning tracking. And so I'm pulling up my binoculars, trying to look real close, and I've got water in them, and I'm trying to figure out whether this is even a buck or not. And about that time, he turned his head, and it was a beautiful, big rack buck. And I pulled up and just completely muffed it at 75 yards on a giant deer, and that was a hard one to swallow, because my daughter shot a buck that same day on her own. And all I could think about is how great it would have been for both of us to connect on the same day and have that moment, and Dad was the one that didn't come through.
Better you than her, I suppose.
So that was one of the more painful ones, just because of how it all happened.
So what do you think you did? In retrospect, what do you think happened?
I rushed it. I rushed it, didn't take my time. I had no reason to rush it. I had a peep sight everyone up here, or, most everyone, the gun of choice is a Remington pump. That's kind of like the deer tracker's gun. And a lot of guys, most of the guys that I know that I hunt with all run peep sights because you don't have to deal with the snow and all that. That was the last time I hunted with a peep sight because I realized that I'm a scope guy, and I was forcing it, just because it is nice not dealing with the snow and everything with a scope. But it just rushed it and blew it, which it certainly isn't the only time I've blown it. I've missed a lot more than that, but that was probably one of the most painful, just because of the type of deer it was and the circumstances. And I worked so hard, and I did it. When you're tracking, you're basically out there all day trying to make the right moves and make the right decisions. I made every decision exactly right up until the last one. And so every decision before then didn't matter because I didn't close the deal. But it was a fun day still.
Yeah, it's still in my mind that has to hurt and be painful, but that's still a pretty large or big success to like have laid eyes on them and caught up with them. And like you said, you made every other decision correctly. So at least kind of confirms a lot of like your decision making abilities while you're out there. And so hopefully that's replicable. And next opportunity you got, you'll hopefully be better off. I made a weird mistake last year. It was a first time I've experienced this, so I'll never do it again. It's how you learn things. The hard way is the best way in some cases, painful way. But I had my rifle and gun sitting like on my lap as I sit on the ground, but it's in between my lap and my hand warmer muff, which has got hand warmers in it. So it's sitting there for who knows how long. And finally some deer stroll up and I pull up my gun and I go to look through my scope and it's completely fogged up. So luckily there's enough time for these deer to like settle into the area that they had gotten scared out of into my range, where they had no idea I was there. The wind was in my favor and stuff, and it unfogged up. But then it created a panic in me because I'm like, oh shit, is this thing going to unfog in time for me to shoot? I literally can't see anything. And I only had the scope, so I didn't have an over under. And yeah, it was a moment where I was like, well, never again am I going to sit here with my gun like that underneath my muff, because a foggy lens isn't going to do any good. You might not have that long of a chance to.
The only way to learn is by making a mistake a lot of the times.
Yep.
And that goes a lot. That goes along with everything, and especially hunting, I think.
It's magnified in hunting for sure.
But it's we've actually got one of the guys that he was on our podcast last week or a couple weeks ago anyway, that he's gone with Hal's guided them the last couple of years for a week. He's from Wisconsin also, and he makes the trek out every year. He's coming back this year, and I believe he just heard about tracking on the podcast and just was intrigued by it and came and checked it out. He's hooked now. He comes every season.
Cool.
How many guys can you guide in a season? Like how many clients or whatever do you guys take on?
We've got about, so we do fully guided hunts, which are really popular. We do 4 weeks of it. So we have fully guided hunts, then we have American plan, which is you come, you get your lodging and your meals, but no guiding. And then we have just the lodging where you come and do your own thing and do your own meals and stuff. So each week, we sleep about 50 people on property. But we don't have that many. We usually have, I would say 20 guys each week, between all the hunts. Some weeks the earlier weeks, it's probably busier with the guiding because we just have more guides those weeks. So, there's typically, I think, 6 guided hunts the first couple of weeks. And then after that, there's usually 4 or 5. And then the rest will be American plan and or they just come and get their own lodging and do their own food.
Sounds awesome, honestly.
Yeah, to get away to the main woods.
Yeah, it's a great time. And it's not, it's not for guys that want to come see deer every day and, guaranteed shot opportunity. I mean, there's weeks where, if it's a tough week, very few people even see deer that week, let alone get a shot at one. So
sounds familiar.
You just kind of have to know what you're coming for and what you're in for. But every year, guys come back for their punishment. Some reason.
It's a different variety of deer camp. And, a lot of us here in Wisconsin that are used to doing a traditional North Woods deer camp, and we're talking way north, it's not much different. I mean, you might get 1 or 2 shot opportunities if you're lucky. You might see 4 deer during the 9-day gun season up there. So it's really not too out of normal from that kind of experience.
Yeah, some of my favorite things hunting the Northwoods. I had opportunities at deer, but I was like, those were my first years hunting ever. So I didn't even know what to do. The first deer I ever saw was a doe under my tree, and I couldn't believe it. It was the first deer I ever saw in the wild from a tree. And I was like, holy shit, they exist. Here it is. Get my dad on the walkie-talkie. There's a deer. He's like, well, put the walkie-talkie on, pick up your gun. And I was like, by the time I did that, the thing ran off, but I was so damn excited. It was just neat to experience that. I had more fun probably driving at the time I think my dad was driving a Dodge Ram Charger, the 4-barrel carb 360 V8 or something like that.
Oh, geez.
Freaking tank. We'd take that in the logging roads. He'd be like, yeah, you take this and I'll meet you over here. I'm like, sweet. I get to drive this thing on a logging road. 16, loving life. That was the best, So, I mean, that's part of the memory. You're up in these areas.
Hal's constantly talking about his Ram Charger. We got to hear about his Ram Charger all the time.
God. My dad, I drove
he loves that thing.
Some shit car throughout all of high school, and it'd break down like every week. And my dad's like, well, you can take my Ram Charger to school. And I drove like 45 minutes one way to school. I went to a different district and stuff. And I remember putting $20 a day in that effing thing, and the gas gauge never moved off empty. It's like, holy crap.
And I think going back to what you were saying about the Wisconsin deer camp, I've always kind of, in my mind, thought it was very similar out there to here. And I think it is. Everyone in Maine has a camp, and when deer season comes, they get their group together and they're off to camp, and it's all about the experience. You don't get that in many places, the way you do in the north.
No, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, that's a tradition. It's passed on. It's dwindling, obviously, though they say hunter numbers are up again. I think with COVID, people are looking to rediscover something different, but people don't have the land anymore. The generation that hunted it and had camp there had sold it off to somewhere, somebody else who maybe doesn't hunt, or they're one person or 2 people that hunt. So it's not as big as it was, but it sure is a very enjoyable tradition.
Absolutely. Yeah. We all look forward to it every year, even though, we guide. I usually guide 2 weeks in November, and then I'll hunt myself the other couple of weeks. A couple of years ago, I guided 4 weeks, and it's a grind. So I backed off that a little bit, but it's still, when you're out there hunting every day, it's hard to complain too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to come back to reality after that too. So. I bet you get done with that and you're like, I got to check back in here. Oh, geez. I'd have a tough time with that.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of our weeks here, we don't hunt on Sundays in Maine. It's always been that way. It's one of the old blue laws, but so it's 6 days of hunting, and Sunday you kind of look forward to it, because it's your little break from going all day long. But inevitably you get up the next morning, you can't wait to go do it again. So
yeah, it's cool, super fun. Well, just to be clear, where obviously you guys have your own podcast, you have the lodging and the guiding and all of that stuff. where do you want to direct people to go check you guys out for those that may not know in our audience?
Yeah. So I'd like everyone to check out our podcast, Big Woods Bucks, if you're interested in our kind of hunting and hunting the North Woods. We focus mainly on tracking deer, but we get a lot into the moose thing, if that's something you're interested in, because all of us are moose guides as well. And then my business is Lake Parlin Lodge. We're a year-round destination. We're on a lake, hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, that sort of thing. So lakeparlinlodge.com and bigwoodsbucks.com.
Lake, what is it? Lake
Parlin, Parlin.
Thank you.
You got it.
Yeah, so make sure people understood and got it clearly. Well, Joe, thanks for jumping on with us tonight. I'm going to end the live broadcast, and then we'll stick around for just a moment to debrief with you. But everybody that tuned in and hung on with us throughout the whole episode and commented and things of that nature, thanks so much. As everyone knows, we produce the same night we record, so this will be in podcast land tonight.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come on and talk with you guys tonight.
It was awesome.